رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي.
Assalamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ramadan Kareem, Ramadan Mubarak. Welcome to the Speak From Within podcast. If you're new here, I'm your host Nasra. I hope you guys are all doing well, inshallah, and taking advantage of this very blessed month and making lots of dua for our brothers and sisters in Palestine and for ourselves as well. May He accept all of our duas this month. I'm very excited for today's episode because I'm going to be introducing a new series that I'm starting on this podcast and this channel. I feel like I've grown a lot in the past few years. I noticed that I wasted a lot of time, my teenage years and my childhood years, with things that I would do so differently today. So I'm going to be starting a new series titled Every Fifth, where every fifth episode on this podcast or this channel, I share a few things that I wish I knew when I was younger. So perhaps through my lessons and through what I've learned, I'm able to help somebody and you're able to excel so much further than I possibly could have at that stage of my life. The amount of things that I share are going to be in correspondence with the number of the episode. In honor of this being the 5th episode, I'm going to be sharing 5 things I would tell my younger self. And on the 10th episode, inshallah, I'll share 10 things and so on and so forth. So this is the first episode of the Every 5th series. The first advice I would tell my younger self, my 15-year-old younger self, is to make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the core center of your life and not His creations. The reason I start off with this one is because it's very heavy and it's also very broad at the same time, which means that it's able to target all aspects of your life. Younger Nasra really wasted a lot of time making other people and other materialistic things the core center of her life, thinking that it was going to lead to success because everybody else was doing it. Yet in reality, all it did was lead to heartbreak and pain and a lack of purposeness. I remember always carrying with me this like really deep but subtle sadness with me. Everywhere I went, everything I did, I would first ask myself, what's that person thinking? What's that person doing? How can I fit myself into here? How can I fit myself into there? Thinking that I was going to find meaning. Yeah, I just lost who I was. I lost my identity and I lost my purpose. I would go back in that time and I would really just focus on getting to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because through Him I would have gotten to know myself and I would have found the purpose that I was looking for so desperately. Instead of my first questions being, what is this person thinking? I would ask myself, what does Allah think of this? Instead of asking myself, does this make this person happy? I would ask myself, is this pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? When you really start to make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the core center of your life, everything else, it fixes itself. All the bumps smooth out and the doors open up. So if you're at this current stage of your life, feeling like you don't know why you're here, or feeling a lack of purposeness, or maybe even like me carrying that deep but subtle sadness with you, regardless of what age you are, ask yourself, who or what is the center of my life right now? And if it's not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there's your answer, right? That's how you truly discover yourself and learn about yourself, because you're learning yourself through your creator. It's going to require new changes and new decisions and new thought process. The second advice I would give my younger self is don't put so much pressure and focus on other people's comments and or opinions. I think many of us can relate that we sometimes put so much focus on other people's opinions about us and how we're perceived by others, to the point where it leads us to make decisions that are not beneficial to us in this world but also in the next world. If 10 people were to look at one person, all 10 people would have different thoughts and opinions and perceptions about that one person. Why is that? Because all 10 people grew up differently and have different morals and different values and different expectations from society. So it's extremely illogical for us to think that we're able to please everybody. And that's where my younger self was struggling. It was a really draining process that I went through, thinking that I could fit into every single person's narrative about what was good and what was right. So I would say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the judge, and He also sent down a book to tell us what's right and wrong. How convenient is that? So as long as you're following the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing that this dunya is the temporary one and not the final one, and you're just working to please Him and Him alone, then it's pointless to worry about what that person is saying or what that person thinks. And it's okay, sometimes we might slip up because we are humans. We might find ourselves again putting that focus and that pressure on wanting to fit into other people's opinions about us. But that's when we take a step back and again reconnect ourselves with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ask ourselves those questions. Is this pleasing to Allah? Is this going to benefit me in the akhirah? If the answers are yes, then why should I care what that person thinks of me? They're not going to follow me to the grave. They're also going to be judged by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I would rather put my focus on pleasing the one who is the judge. This even goes for unrealistic beauty standards in society. As Muslim girls, we're always forced to fit this specific standard. As a result, it makes us focus on other people's perceptions so much. I would like to share a little logical thought process that I have with myself when I feel very overwhelmed with society standards. I don't know if it's going to help anybody. It's very fitting to the way my brain works, but I will still share it just in case of that possibility that it might help at least one person, inshallah. It requires us to ask ourselves a little bit of questions, but we already know the answers to the questions. So I ask myself, did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create me? The answer is yes. And then I ask myself, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala free from making any mistakes? The answer is also yes. So then I like to say to myself that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created me, He is free from making any mistakes. That means that I have been created to be exactly the way I am meant to be, on the outside and in the inside. If I was meant to be created exactly the way I am created right now, that means that I was the standard for myself. And if I am the standard, that means that I am beautiful and I am allowed to love myself and I am allowed to be proud of myself because I was created exactly the way I'm meant to be created for a reason. And look, it also becomes an act of ibadah because you realize that this is greater than any beauty standards that could possibly be created by other humans. It's a standard from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm going to love myself for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because He gave me so much. He fashioned me to look this way and He fashioned me to have this certain personality. So I'm going to love myself for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This process of asking myself these questions and coming to these conclusions really helped me. So I just wanted to share it in hopes that it might help you as well, inshallah. The third advice I would give to my younger self is to read. There is a reason that was the first word revealed to our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Knowledge is so important and it's so powerful. When I was younger, I wasted so much time just binge watching TV shows and watching YouTube channels, scrolling on social media, going out with friends, not really doing anything meaningful, or even just reading fiction books. I also read a lot of fiction books, but that didn't help me better myself in any way in my religion or even just in this dunya. So I would really tell my younger self to befriend the Quran and read it and study its translations and read books that are going to benefit you and teach you what you did not know before. I just say to myself, standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and saying, oh yeah Allah, I didn't know. I don't think that's going to work. He's made knowledge so easy for us now. We have to be the ones that are actively seeking it out because knowledge is what saves us from the punishment of the grave. It's what admits us into Jannat al-Firdaus inshallah by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's what heals our relationships and it's what leads to our success in the akhirah and also in this dunya. The fourth advice I would give my younger self is to fear the creator and not the creations. Truthfully speaking, this is a lesson that I'm still working on. Social anxiety and just anxiety in general was a lot worse when I was younger, and I'm sure many of you guys can relate. It's a work in progress. I would often find myself tongue-tied or incapable of taking action in fear of other people or in fear of losing out on something. That feeling of wanting to speak up was always there, yet I suppressed it and I ignored it for as long as I could. So I would really tell my younger self and even my current self, because like I said, it is a work in progress, to truly fear the creator and not his creations, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our final return. There is no one else to fear besides him. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Indeed, to Allah we belong and to him we return. So if you are struggling like me, just know that you are not alone, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the knowledge of him to know that there is none worthy of worship besides him, and the strength of our religion to become better people for his sake. So in a way, I'm saying this to myself and to you. Be proud of who you are. Speak up for what you know is right. Love your religion and fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Through this podcast and this channel, inshallah, I hope that I'm doing just that. I always open the door for Muslim girls who really want to better themselves for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and need that constant reminder that we're not working towards this dunya, we're working towards the akhirah and the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fifth advice I would give my younger self is to treat people the way you want to be treated, not by them, but by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This one is also something I'm actually still working on during this month of Ramadan. Is as human beings, we can only be so merciful, we can only be so forgiving, we can only be so patient. But with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of that is completely limitless. In His mercy, in His bounty, in His love, in His forgiveness, in the way He provides, it's all limitless. And so when we start to treat people with that expectation that Allah will always be there for me, Allah will always provide for me, Allah is always willing to forgive me, then I can do the same for others in hope that Allah will do the same for me. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, have mercy on those on earth and the one in the heavens will have mercy on you. And what better time to put this lesson into practice than the month of Ramadan, where it's all about sacrifice and ibadah and working to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is it for today's episode. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I really always appreciate it from the bottom of my heart, and I really hope that this was beneficial for you in some way and has given you the tools or inspiration to better yourself for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and strive for Jannah. I hope to see you in the next episode. Until then, assalamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
قد أوتيت سؤلك يا موسى ولقد مننا عليك مرة أخرى